What if Saladin lost at Hattin? The Middle East changed. Close your eyes and picture the dust, the heat, the shimmer above a burning ridge. On one side, the crescent banners of Saladin's army. On the other, the battered but unbroken lines of Frankish knights, the red cross flashing in the sun. Now twist the scene. The water holds. The fire never reaches the wagons. The desperate march across parched earth never happens. Imagine the Battle of Hattin ends not with a shattered Crusader host and a captured king, but with a stalemate or a stunning Frankish counterstrike. The relic of the true cross rescued, Jerusalem unfallen. 1,000 years of history, rewired in a single day. Before we rewrite the map, let's ground ourselves in what truly happened. The year is 1187. The Crusader states have clung to the Levant for nearly a century, a patchwork of castles, ports, and pilgrimage roads. Their kings rule as much by deal-making as by sword, sometimes marrying local Christians, sometimes negotiating with Muslim rulers, always balancing Venice and Genoa against each other like rival wolves snapping over the same bone. Enter Saladin, a unifier, tactician, and symbol. He fuses Egypt and Syria under his banner and turns the mood of the Islamic world toward jihad. In July, he lures the Crusader army into the hills near the horns of Hattin. Desperate for water, surrounded by fires and arrows, the Frankish infantry buckles. The cavalry charges, again and again, and breaks like waves on stone. The king of Jerusalem is captured. The true cross is seized. Within months, Jerusalem falls. The Third Crusade arrives like a storm, led by Richard the Lionheart. Cities are retaken along the coast, Acre, Jaffa, but the holy city itself remains out of reach. Decades later, the Mamluks rise in Egypt, shatter the last Crusader fortresses, and in 1291, Acre falls. The Latin East dies in fire. That's our anchor. Now let's pull it free. Change one decision and watch the world ripple. In this alternate timeline, the Crusader High Command listens to caution. Raymond of Tripoli argues against marching into heat and sand to rescue a trap at Tiberias. And for once, the council listens. The army falls back toward the water-rich coast. Saladin, deprived of his killing ground, finds a foe that reforms behind shields and streams. The set-piece slaughter never comes. Instead, a night raid breaks his camp lines. Panic spreads. A Crusader wedge punches out, preserves the true cross, rescues captives, and slips away in order. No decisive collapse means no open road to Jerusalem. Saladin still commands respect, resources, and zeal. But the magic of inevitable victory is gone. Negotiations begin. Truces may follow. When ships from the west finally crest the horizon, they're not racing to reclaim a catastrophe. They're reinforcing a defense that held. A third crusade still lands, but its tone is different. Not vengeance, but consolidation. Richard's legend becomes the story of a commander who locks the frontier and turns it into a living border. Here's where consequences become structural. With Jerusalem intact, the appetite for a desperate new crusade to pay debts and grab quick glory is weaker. The Fourth Crusade never needs to repurpose itself to sack Constantinople in 1204. Venice still wants profit, it always does. But instead of steering an army to burn the Queen of Cities, it steers treasure and manpower down the coast to fortify a stable Latin East that holds the gateways of trade. Constantinople stays intact. The Byzantine Empire remains bruised, pressured by Turks in Anatolia, but unbroken. That single survival has a long shadow. A living Byzantium means Greek scholars remain at their desks, not fleeing west with armfuls of manuscripts because their city burns. The transfer of knowledge into Italy still happens, but slower, richer, more circular. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Jerusalem becomes more than a Crusader camp. It matures. Law codes blend Frankish custom with local practice. Pilgrims share streets with merchants and monks. Syriac Christians and Armenian guildsmen. Arabic physicians barter for Genoese glass. Latin bishops argue with Greek abbots, then sit down for wine. The Holy City morphs into a tense, bustling crossroads, and power follows ports. With the land route to the Levant safe under Latin garrisons and Byzantine protection, Venice and Genoa pour investment into Acre, Jaffa, and Tyre. The memory of the Silk Road sits just behind the horizon, and the spice trade feels close enough to taste. Overland caravans from Mosul and Aleppo bring pepper, sugar, and silk. Ships carry them to black-clad merchants in Italy, north to Flanders, east to Cyprus and Rhodes. Every coin that clinks in a counting house in Venice reminds Europe of a simple truth. The East is open, by bridge, not by cannon. That shift delays something we take for granted: the desperate search for a sea road around Africa. In our original timeline, the fall of the Latin East, and later, the Ottoman chokehold on Eastern trade, helped push Portugal and Spain to find new paths. In this alternate world, the pressure changes. There's still ambition on the Atlantic coast, still bold sailors, still a prince staring at maps by candlelight. But urgency is a slow fire, not a fuse. Lisbon experiments. Sagres trains navigators. The Canary Islands see sails. Yet the full shock of rounding Africa for spices comes later, by decades, maybe a century, because the old arteries still carry blood. Meanwhile, the Islamic world adjusts. Saladin's prestige is dented, not destroyed. He consolidates Egypt and Syria, but accepts truces that keep Jerusalem out of reach. The ideology of urgent jihad cools from flame to coals. Without the icon of a fallen Jerusalem to rally around, sermons sound different. The Ayyubid dynasty spends more time negotiating tax revenues and less time planning sieges. And when succession struggles arrive, as they always do, their rivals are not galvanized by a burning Crusader threat, but by ordinary court politics. You feel the next tremor before it hits: the Mongols. In our world, Hulagu Khan sweeps into the Middle East in the 1250s, destroying Baghdad, cracking Aleppo, and rolling down toward the coast. He meets stiff resistance from the Mamluks, Egypt's warrior caste, who stop him at Ain Jalut in 1260. In this timeline, that story risks a split. Because the Latin East still stands, fortified and organized, it has a reason to write letters eastward, not as a desperate plea, but as a calculated play. The historical record shows real attempts at Frankish Mongol coordination, envoys, proposals, shared enemies. Here, those letters become binding. Picture a Latin-Mongol compact. Crusader fleets harass the Egyptian coast, while Hulagu surges down through Syria. Antioch and Tripoli provide supplies. Byzantine ports let Mongol caravan traffic pass under guard. Mamluk Egypt finds itself squeezed between arrows and oars. Ain Jalut still happens. But this time the Mamluks are not rested and ready with morale high. They're stretched. A Frankish detachment on the coast raids the delta, sabotaging grain fleets. At the battle itself, Mongol Tumans are reinforced by Frankish crossbowmen and mounted sergeants. Small numbers, big effect. The shock of composite bows and disciplined bolts turns the tide. If the Mamluks break, the consequences are seismic. A Latin Jerusalem now faces a fractured, Mongol-frightened south. Egypt could splinter into competing warlords paying tribute to a distant Khan. The Nile opens to commerce under protectorates and piers. The Holy City becomes a staging point for trade down the Red Sea, linking to the Indian Ocean earlier through supervised corridors. Imagine Venetian and Genoese factors setting up counting houses in Alexandria under a long shadow of Mongol seals, while local merchants strike deals for safe passage. It's uneasy, it's exploitative, but it's a bridge, and bridges make empires richer than walls do. With that wealth comes knowledge. Translation schools flourish in Jerusalem and Acre, places that, in our world, fall silent by 1291. Instead, they buzz. Greek manuscripts flow from Constantinople without the trauma of conquest. Arabic treatises on optics, medicine, and mathematics are copied on Latin parchment under lamps that burn late into the night. In this crossroads city, a physician from Damascus debates a monk from Cluny. A Jewish scholar annotates both and collects a patron's coin. The scholastic movement, already brewing in Paris and Bologna, feeds on this constant exchange, not only through Spain's Toledo, but through a second artery in the Levant. The result isn't a sudden leap to modern science, but a thicker rope of continuity. The West learns to learn in a different shape. There are darker currents too. A surviving Crusader state isn't a fairy tale. It means more garrisons, more taxes, more hard bargains with local peasants and urban guilds. It means tense street corners where languages clash. Violence doesn't vanish, it mutates. Pogroms could still ignite. Pilgrims still get robbed. Zealots still preach. But the crucible of constant proximity forces accommodation. You see bilingual court records, mixed mercantile ventures, and marriages that shock chroniclers who preferred their chronicles neat. Identity in the Levant turns practical. Not peaceful, practical. Back north, Constantinople, never sacked in 1204, has its own renaissance. The emperors fight the same grinding struggle in Anatolia, but they fight it from a living capital, not from exile in Nicaea. A stronger Byzantine state slows Turkish advance, throws fewer frontiers to the wind, and coordinates more often with the Latin East for mutual defense. A century later, the Ottomans still rise because demographics and steppe politics are relentless. But when they push against the Bosporus, they meet a city that has not been hollowed out. The siege comes later, or fails. If Constantinople stands deep into the 15th century, the shockwave of its fall in 1453, so crucial to the story we tell about the Renaissance, arrives weaker or not at all. Western humanism still blossoms, but the drama of fleeing scholars becomes a slow migration instead of a stampede. And what of Iberia? The Reconquista continues, with or without a Crusader Jerusalem, but its rhetoric shifts. With the Holy City safe, Rome puts fewer indulgences and fewer nights on ships for the Western Mediterranean because the East is already secured. The final acts in Granada may happen later, or with different banners leading the charge. When 1492 arrives, it might not carry the same triple thunder of conquest, expulsion, and discovery in a single year. Sometimes history doesn't break. It dissolves and reformulates, like sugar in a cup. Midway through our alternate timeline, stand still and breathe. Notice the surprising winners. Venice and Genoa still gorge on trade, but they share the feast with Levantine cities that don't die young. Jerusalem becomes a city of ledgers as much as relics. Byzantium, spared a nightmare, limps farther into the future on stronger legs. The Mongols' western branch, instead of slamming into a wall in Egypt, bleeds into a patchwork of clientage and compromise, then dissolves, having redrawn what roots matter. The losers? The Mamluks, perhaps never rising to the heights they reach in our world. The Ottomans delayed, and the Portuguese who must wait a little longer to play kingmakers on the Indian Ocean. Question for you. In a world where Jerusalem never falls in 1187, which consequence feels most transformative? The survival of Byzantium, the delayed age of discovery, or the Latin-Mongol cooperation reshaping Egypt? Share your pick and why. And if you're enjoying this kind of deep dive into turning points, tap like so the algorithm knows, and subscribe for the next What If we tear open. Let's push farther. Cultures don't just trade goods, they trade myths. The legend of Saladin changes. In our world, he becomes a chivalric mirror, admired even by his enemies. Here, he's still respected, but his aura is complicated by an inconclusive Hattin and a permanent truce with the Franks. In Arabic poetry and sermon, his star dims a shade. In Latin chronicles, the Saracen prince becomes a long-term negotiating partner, not a dragon to be slain. Children grow up hearing different bedtime stories. Those stories shape borders. Christian Europe's inner politics also bend. The papacy loses a certain leverage that comes with catastrophe. When Jerusalem fell, popes could summon kings with the cry of sacred emergency. Here, the call is for maintenance, not miracle. Funding a bridge is less thrilling than funding a war, so kings bargain harder. They send fewer armies and more engineers. Crusading turns into a habit of garrisons and money, not mass levy and blood. That quiet change weakens the theological justification for smashing heretics at home. The Albigensian Crusade in southern France might be smaller, slower, less excused by the climate of holy war abroad. The map of Languedoc may keep different colors. On the streets of Jerusalem, daily life looks both familiar and alien. A Latin city council meets with a Greek bishop and a Muslim qadi to settle tradesmen's disputes, because business hates emptiness. Pilgrims in coarse wool queue at the Holy Sepulchre, while Armenian goldsmiths argue prices in the bazaar. A Jewish physician tends a Norman knight's fever and returns home to light Shabbat candles. The city is not a utopia, it's a negotiation without end. But it endures, and endurance changes everything. Technology rises from need. With fortified borders that must be watched year after year, castle architecture in the Levant evolves faster. Concentric walls, angled bastions, and improved fieldworks appear earlier under the pressure of both Frankish and Muslim siegecraft. Water systems, cisterns, aqueducts, norias, become a shared art in a dry country that demands it. When this know-how migrates west through builders and books, you see Europe's strongholds and cities adopt it not in the 14th century, but in the 13th. Earlier urban resilience sometimes means a famine is managed, a plague contained, a revolt avoided. Small victories, large consequences. There's a ghost you can't ignore. The Black Death. The plague's path in the 14th century depends on trade routes. In a world where the Levant's arteries stay open and busy, the disease still comes. In fact, it may come sooner to some cities, spread differently, kill other kings. But the resilience built by decades of continuous east-west exchange could also mean better responses. Quarantine practices observed in port cities that learned the hard way to manage risk. Venice historically pioneered quarantine. In this timeline, Acre and Tyre add chapters to that manual. The body count may still be catastrophic, but the institutional memory looks different. Recovery starts with a handbook rather than pure panic. When we step back to the Grand Mural, the colors shift. Europe's Renaissance is less about sudden rediscovery and more about constant conversation. The Ottoman Empire rises later, perhaps with a different capital and a different logic, because a living Byzantium and a fortified Levant complicate their routes to power. The Indian Ocean trade doesn't belong to Lisbon right away. It becomes a tripartite contest among Arab merchants, Italian financiers, and cautious Western monarchs trying to avoid war while making a killing. America still waits across the sea. It's still there, inevitable and vast. But the question of when sails finally slice into Caribbean light becomes a matter of slow pressure, not emergency release. And Jerusalem. In this timeline, it's not the last stand of a doomed experiment. It's a hinge. Sometimes it's a tense protectorate under Mongol shadow. Sometimes it's a proud frontier capital under a treaty. Sometimes it's almost taken, and sometimes it bleeds. But it survives well past 1291, into a world recognizable and yet rewritten. History is full of hinges. We are used to celebrating the loose ones, the days that swung wide open with a crash. Hattin is one of those, but it could have been a stiff hinge, creaking only a little. If Saladin had not snapped the Crusader army at that dry ridge, if water had been one valley closer, if a king had listened to a cautious count, our maps would speak different names, and our myths would sing different songs. The lesson is simple and unnerving. Sometimes the strongest empires are built not on victory, but on endurance. And sometimes the stories we take as destiny were one decision away from becoming footnotes. So what if Saladin lost at Hattin? The Middle East changes. The world changes. And once you see that, you start to wonder how many other dusty ridges we've mistaken for fate.